Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues from across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's second inauguration ceremony is just hours away. With forecasts predicting temperatures as low as minus 12 degrees Celsius, Trump decided to move the event indoors for the first time in 40 years. The last time an inauguration was held indoors because of the weather was in 1985 for former Republican President Ronald Reagan. With world diplomats and citizens planning to attend, questions are emerging about the impact on attendance and the broader significance of this inauguration. Attention is also focused on Trump's inaugural address and the return of the farewell event for the outgoing President Joe Biden, which could signal key shifts in the transition of power and the tone of the new administration. For a closer look into the current situation ahead of the inauguration ceremony, we first connect to our Voice of America correspondent, Jessica Stone in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Jessica.
Good to be with you.
So the weather forecast predicts extremely cold temperatures for Inauguration Day, and because of this, the ceremony is being held indoors. Jessica, could you give us some details on how the ceremony will proceed, and what has Trump said about this?
Well, the ceremony inside the Capitol Rotunda, just a couple of blocks from where I am, which is the VOA headquarters, is going to take place around 11 local time, and that will come after some other parts of the ceremony and festivities, including a church service around 8:30, and other events. And in fact, the Bidens will welcome the Trumps to the White House as well ahead of the departing to the Capitol to go for that inauguration swearing in. But having said that, that'll be taking place in the Capitol Rotunda. Both Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and President-elect Donald Trump will be sworn in by Chief Justice John Roberts for Trump and Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh for J.D. Vance as they are inside of the Capitol Rotunda. Now, that's a much smaller space than any of the other venues that could have taken place. So we're only expecting 50 to 60 people, VIPs and dignitaries, as Trump referred to them on Truth Social yesterday. But we don't know who exactly is going to be in the room aside from potentially family members and close advisors. That is going to be able to be viewed on a live stream from the Capital One Arena, which only fits 20,000 people. And so that is the sort of state of play. They're then going to get back into the vehicles and go over to the Capitol Rotunda. Trump's expected to make some remarks there and then go to the White House from there.
Right. Then how do you think this sudden change will affect the turnout and the atmosphere of inauguration there? There have been news that many people, including world diplomats, were planning to visit. Do we know if they would be able to be accommodated?
Yeah, we don't know who's going to be inside the Capitol Arena. What we know is that there's an enormous difference between 250,000 tickets that were issued for people to attend the inauguration outside and 20,000 seats inside the Capitol Arena. We don't know whether one of those outside tickets is going to be anything more than commemorative, whether it will give someone an entree to the Capital One Arena for viewing, or if those folks are going to have to find a place to view elsewhere, such as their hotels or local bars and restaurants. There are watch parties being planned at bars and restaurants here in Washington, D.C., a chance to cash in on the president and the inauguration early here. But we don't yet know where everyone will be, particularly those dignitaries and world leaders. I believe the president of Argentina is expected, and possibly the prime minister of Italy. Xi Jinping, the president of China, was invited, but sent instead his vice president to attend to the inauguration, which is an unusual state of affairs. Normally, it is not something that international leaders attend.
Right. And also something different from the past was the former president's farewell event, which was omitted 4 years ago. It's now included in the ceremony schedule. And Biden says he's planning to attend, showcasing a peaceful transfer of power. Jessica, what could this signify for the tone of the inauguration? And do you think this could lead to a smooth transition of government operations to the new administration?
Well, those are really two separate questions. The transition is managed by the staff in large part and set up by the executive, but it is already underway, and most of it has taken place before today. The transition has been much smoother from the previous Trump White House. Having covered the previous Trump White House, I can tell you that firsthand. It was messy and chaotic. They did not expect to be in government, and so it was a very different state of affairs to now, where there is an electoral popular vote majority for President Trump, as well as a electoral college win. And so it is much smoother in that sense. But in terms of the message that you asked about that Biden wants to send, he is sending a message that the peaceful transfer of power is to be expected, that it is a standard thing to give from one president to another, even though he did not receive it from former President Trump when he came into office, because President Trump still believed that he had won the election. He was not willing to let go of the idea that he had not won the 2020 election. And so President Biden will be accompanying President Trump to the Capitol for his swearing in. There is this farewell ceremony at the White House that he is going forward with to essentially keep those traditions and keep the appearance of a stable government and a peaceful transfer of power.
Mm-hmm. Then what about the inaugural speech that we would be expecting from Trump? How do you think it would differ from his first speech, particularly in terms of messaging and priorities?
I think we're going to see a very different tone and a different message from 8 years ago. From 8 years ago, we saw American carnage, the forgotten men and women. These were phrases that Trump uttered, and he really painted a dark picture of America. President Trump is not coming into office seeing the same dark picture. He certainly does say that the 4 years that we've had are something he wants to move away from, and that he is going to change much of it on day one. But it is not all doom and gloom in his speeches. He's talking about the promise of America and the steps that he's going to take to restore the economy and the immigration picture, promises he made on the campaign trail that he has been reiterating in his speeches here. And so we expect him to say that he is launching a revolution of common sense, according to Wall Street Journal reporting, they having seen some excerpts of the speech, and talk about the changes he's going to make good on his campaign promises.
Then what Trump, he has been spending the past 2 years on campaigning, making more than a dozen promises about what he would, do on his first day in office. Could you remind us of some that are highly likely at this point?
Yeah, so he's got a big focus, obviously, on immigration and closing the southern border, changing the way asylum seekers are treated inside this country. Are they caught and released, as the Biden administration allowed them to be, or will they be detained while they're waiting for their court appearance for their asylum claims? He wants much more resources on the southern border. We expect him to declare a national emergency in one of his executive orders, surging additional resources to the southern border, changing and reversing many of those immigration policies that allowed undocumented migrants to stay in this country, even under the claim of asylum, without detention or effective tracking. And he is also going to take some steps to reverse the Biden climate policy, take some of the money out of the Inflation Reduction Act for climate, take away some of the mandates on renewable energy, open up federal lands for drilling, such as the National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. And we also expect him to make some key changes in how the federal workforce is treated. He wants them to be in the office, no longer able to work from home. And he also wants to change some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and programs that are in the federal government today. Is giving additional ability for people to be hired based on their ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation.
All right, so it seems like Trump is determined to carry out many of his policies. So so we'll look forward to that. And Jessica, thank you so much for bringing us the latest from Washington.
You bet. Good to be with you.
And now to explore more on the implications of these changes, as well as the potential shifts in U.S. foreign policy under the Trump administration, we connect to Hannah Kim, Assistant Professor of International Studies at Seogang University, GSIS. Thank you for coming on, Professor Kim.
Thank you for having me.
So now that the Trump 2.0 era has begun, what kind of big changes could we expect in the global landscape?
So normally I would say that we don't expect such big changes, but I think in this case, we will be seeing a lot of big changes during the Trump 2.0 era. This will have far-reaching impacts both domestically and globally, and they kind of work together. They tend to be interconnected and interrelated. So some of the changes that we've already started to see, even before he has taken office, are changes related to immigration, as was mentioned before, issues related to border security, travel bans. All of these messages have already started up. There are also discussions related to trade and economic policies. And we've already witnessed, within the past, day, issues related to tech regulation, where there was the ban and restoration of TikTok. So we're already seeing these changes happening domestically within the United States, and they're having spillover effects to the global landscape as well. And this is leading to shifts in terms of foreign policy in various ways. And so there are going to be a lot of economic, political, cultural shifts, but I think one broad way to describe all of these shifts and the most critical point of change that we're actually going to see is that the United States is less likely to pursue a foreign policy that's grounded in liberal values. President Trump has continuously shown skepticism towards the liberal international order and the value of the alliance system. And he has also reiterated his desire to pursue the America First policy. And so during the Trump 2.0 era, we're going to see Washington prioritizing narrowly defined national interests under the banner of America First. And as a result of that, there's going to be a lot of changes in the global political landscape, liberal values and liberal norms, which are for the most part widely accepted and dominant in the international world right now, are going to start to slowly erode, and individual states' pursuit of power may also become a little bit more pronounced as well.
Mhm. Now, let's also touch more upon the inauguration itself. Fundraising efforts have led to a substantial amount of money being raised, with significant contributions from industries like tech, banking, and energy. Professor, how has the donor landscape changed since Trump's previous term, and what does this shift suggest about the relationship between businesses and politics in the U.S.?
So, before there you were talking about how the tone and messages have changed from Trump's first term to his incoming second term, and I think the donor landscape is also showing a very similar shift and change as well. The U.S. political media outlet Politico actually reported a few days ago on the 16th that up to 250 million US dollars were expected to flow as donations into Trump's inauguration committee, super PACs, which are political fundraising organizations, as well as nonprofit organizations. And this is quite different from the time of the Capitol riots that took place on January 6, 2021, when a lot of American companies appeared to be distancing themselves away from Trump. And this is in part because now President Trump is emphasizing very different things. He's emphasizing, the need to reduce unnecessary regulations, maintaining America's edge in various advanced industries, and also easing environmental regulations in energy policy. And so many business leaders are now actively seeking close cooperation with him. And in many ways, he is a very unorthodox president, and they seem to view that as an opportunity. But at the same time, given his unpredictable nature, some also fear that there may be some backlash. There may be disadvantages if their relationship with President Trump turns bad. And so I think these expectations and concerns are likely reflected in his inauguration fundraising, and they speak to the relationship and how the relationship between businesses and politics will change during the next 4 years.
Right. So a lot of things have changed, including Trump's policies and, of course, how Trump would be unpredictable. It had played a big effect. Now, Trump had also invited Chinese President Xi Jinping to his inauguration, which is a very unprecedented move, especially with his previous statements on, dumping tariffs on China. China, in response, vowed to send its vice president instead, and this will be the first time to send a high-ranking official to the inauguration, despite it's the vice president. Professor, what could this mean when it comes to the future Washington-Beijing relations?
So as you mentioned, this is a very unprecedented move. It's very unique. It's very interesting. And if you look at President Trump's key appointments in foreign affairs and national security, you may find that most of them are hardliners on China. So this suggests that the US is likely to adopt a very tough stance towards China. But at the same time, a direct confrontation between the United States and China, which are the two biggest powers, would be a significant burden and a big challenge for the United States, especially in the beginning of his term. So it seems as though President Trump is trying to balance the different situations and manage relations with China carefully while also seeking to thwart a potential unpeaceful rise from China. So in this context, President Trump's unusual invitation signals that there is an importance that he places on the relationship between the United States and China in terms of his foreign policy. But at the same time, it's also very important for China as well because President Xi Jinping was invited. He is not attending, but he is instead sending one of their highest ranking officials, the vice president. So this actually shows that for China too, its top foreign policy priority is the United States.
Right. So, like China, Japan now is also sending a high ranking official, its foreign minister, to Trump's inauguration. But as for South Korea, the South Korean ambassador to the U.S., Cho Hyun-dong, will be attending. Though it has been customary for the ambassador to attend from Korea, there are concerns that South Korea has missed an early diplomatic opportunity with the Trump administration, especially with the current political turmoil following the impeachment crisis. Professor, what are your thoughts and what could be done from South Korea's point?
So as you mentioned, relatively, especially compared to Japan and China, it does seem as though this may look like a missed diplomatic opportunity. And to a certain extent, it is. The current domestic political crisis that's taking place in South Korea, starting from the short-lived martial law attempt that started on December 3rd to the impeachment crisis that has been going on since December and this month, as well as the leadership vacuum that's taking place right now. All of these things that are happening within South Korea are constraining South Korea's diplomatic maneuvers in so many ways. And this includes strengthening and prioritizing Korea's relationship with the new Trump administration. And in many ways, this means that Korea is not putting its best foot forward. This lack of high-level engagement during events like an inauguration can delay or complicate future diplomatic efforts. So this is especially concerning since Trump is likely to have a much more transactional relationship with with allies such as South Korea, and he has shown less commitment towards these alliances. Some experts are already raising the possibility that the US might abandon its goal of North Korean denuclearization and instead pursue a so-called small deal where this could lead to an exchange that would freeze North Korea's nuclear program for sanctions release, but this would essentially be a very temporary solution. And additionally, the renegotiation of defense cost sharing between the United States and South Korea has been mentioned as one of the key foreign policy agendas for President Trump as well. So now South Korea has to show its strong commitment to the ROK-US alliance, also emphasize the strength of the ironclad relationship between the two countries, and also strengthen engagement with the new Trump administration. And so the only way to do this, and the most important thing to do, is to make sure that the current phase of domestic political instability is resolved quickly in South Korea so that close cooperation between South Korea and the United States can resume relatively quickly.
Right, so solving domestic issues would be crucial in further moving forward with its diplomatic issues. Now, moving to the situation in Israel, Israel and Hamas has agreed on a ceasefire deal following 15 months of fighting. And since Trump had been eager to end the war in Gaza and also in Ukraine, how much of an influence do you think Trump could have on the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine?
So during Trump's campaign, he has repeatedly claimed that the war between Russia and Ukraine would not have happened if he was president. And throughout his campaign as well, he pledged to immediately end the conflict if he was elected. And, whether it's a coincidence or not, following Trump's election win, both Russia and Ukraine have shown a more proactive approach towards ceasefire negotiations compared to the past few years since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. But at the same time, even though both countries have shown a more proactive approach, there are a lot of significant disagreements that remain on the details of a potential peace plan, such as territorial boundaries, as well as Ukraine's demilitarization. And this is making an agreement very difficult to achieve. And President Trump is now also well aware of these challenges. And this is because, when he was initially talking about this, he promised that he would end the war within 24 hours of taking office. But now, considering the situation, he has actually shifted his earlier position and offered a more realistic timeline of ending the war within 6 months. So it remains to be seen whether he will effectively mediate and facilitate the end of the war between the two countries after taking office. But for everybody's sake, we can hope that he does keep his word that the war ends relatively quickly so that the war ends and no more lives are lost.
Right, so let's hope for Trump to quickly put an end to the conflict in the Middle East. Professor Kim, thank you so much for your insights tonight. We'll have to leave our discussion right here. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Now, that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.